more like putting things out. Whether it's see, this is what a good ESA does.
She knows.
She knows. This is the Apparently Autistic podcast,
Where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices.
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway,
And Bridget Holloway.
and I am apparently autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. Okay, here we are, episode 2,
Yep.
formerly known as episode 1.
Did a little adjusting along the
Yep.
way.
Hope you guys enjoyed episode 1, which we went ahead and published a day early. Hoping to get this episode out by Wednesday as well. That depends on how my night goes, because it's Tuesday right now. So, but anyways, so our second episode, our original first episode topic was going to basically kind of introduce autism, talk about what it is, what it isn't, what autistics want it to be, and then we'd tell our story basically.
Yep.
So we did say that we would provide some information from scholarly sources, so we went ahead and looked up the definition of autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah, so we'll start with the official definition.
Yeah.
And autism spectrum disorder is a complex developmental condition involving persistent challenges with social communication, restricted interests, and repetitive behavior. While autism is considered a lifelong condition, the need for services and supports because of those challenges varies among individuals with autism.
Okay. So, I mean, there were several different definitions from different sources that I found. That was the one that I think is probably the least objectionable to autistic people. But like, what do autistics prefer people to understand? First thing that we want people to understand is that autism is a neurotype.
Yeah.
It's not a disorder. It's not a disease. You could say condition because it is our condition. But it's the way our brain works. It's like, how did some people put it? It's like a different operating system for a computer.
Yeah.
It's not a virus necessarily. But if you have someone who's used to a Windows computer, an Apple computer, it's going to be a little different to them.
Yeah.
So
I think the biggest part of that for me, wrapping my head around that, was just the simple fact that we're not looking for a cure. We're not looking for something to fix it. There's no fixing needed. It's just who
Right.
you are.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, there's no fix needed. People will argue, and there's a big argument, not argument, but there's kind of a debate between autistic adults and autism parents or autism moms, and a lot of that comes from there might be parents of high support needs autistics, particularly ones that might be nonverbal, that their parents might see that more as, oh, this is something that we need to fix. And there are definitely strategies and things that they need to learn to basically overcome some of those issues in order to just interact in regular society.
Yeah.
But even in those cases, a nonverbal person does not mean a stupid person at all.
No.
A nonverbal autistic person can still be just as intelligent as a verbal person. It's just they have trouble
It's how they
communicating.
express it. Yeah.
Right. So the other thing to understand is a lot of people call it a spectrum. And with that, you have people who will call it low functioning and high functioning, as though it's a linear spectrum, and it's not. There's not, kind of autism down here, or kind of autistic down here, and very autistic down here. Those are terms that are offensive, really, particularly to autistic people ourselves. High functioning and low functioning. Low functioning, if you use that, then it's easy to dismiss someone who's low functioning. Oh, they can't do much. And high functioning, strangely enough, is just as easy to dismiss someone who's high functioning, because basically what you're saying is, oh, they're doing fine. When in reality, high functioning basically means we have figured out how to mask enough and figured out strategies to navigate the neurotypical world enough so that we're not a problem for other people.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we're functioning just fine like everybody else is. And we'll definitely go into that.
Yeah. One of the things you said to me early on that kind of resonated was high functioning is not high functioning, it's high masking.
Yeah.
It's a constant effort on your part.
Yeah, and it's exhausting.
Just navigate a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the big thing that I wish people could understand.
Yeah.
So again, the needs and the difficulties, they're going to vary from person to person, and they'll even vary with that same person. And you can vouch for that. If I'm not overstimulated, I'm not, if my bucket isn't overflowing, so to speak, and we'll kind of talk about that, then I may not have as high support needs. But there are days where I'm practically nonverbal too. There are times when I'm practically nonverbal because it's just too much,
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
It's definitely true. Oh yeah, there's days that I can kind of depend on you to be my right-hand man or do just as many of the things I do, or honestly conduct the day for me if I'm having a down day. And then there's other days that I know that it's just not the day for it. So,
well, and that's the interesting thing about our relationship is we both, I'm autistic and you have MS, which can cause you to have days where you're just exhausted and don't have the energy. So, sometimes we kind of alternate who needs to put in a little more than the 50% that day or whatever. And basically, like, we'll be mentioning a lot of these terms. We've talked about some of those already. Meltdowns. I think we talked about those on the last episode. But we're going to cover a lot of terms on here that we will go into deeper in individual episodes.
In the future,
Okay, so we'll get into our autism story. All right, so I was diagnosed in November of 2021, right?
Officially, yeah.
Officially, right. And thank you, Harvey. And that was after how many years would you say? How long would you say it had been that I was actually like deeply researching it, like pretty sure? Because there was kind of a time where we were like, yeah, I might have Asperger's. Because there were things that just that kind of made sense. We started looking into like what is the deal. For instance, we both had the same attorney for our custody cases, and he always made the comment that if I emailed him, he knew it was going to be long and very detailed, and he would always print it out and just sit back and read it. And it was kind of funny, but it was like I knew that was me. I just didn't know what connected that, what was the cause of that, or whatever.
Yeah, or that it was that far off of normal for anybody else. Like you didn't know.
Right.
That's like, not just what people do.
Well, I started to figure out, obviously, that I was a lot more detailed about stuff, and I chalked that up to I just want to make sure people understand me, and that really is what is going on up here for us. The strange thing is that it seems the more we work to make sure people understand us, the less they understand us.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, so we went through that. I went through a phase where I was just trying to figure out, figure myself out. And one of the things I looked into was the different personality types too.
Oh yeah.
And did the test, and I was the INFJ T, I think it was the last little bit, but either way, basically an introvert, like a caring introvert is something along those lines, and that matched. It made sense. but it still felt like that wasn't
Wasn't the
getting all of
whole,
it,
yeah.
wasn't. And so, yeah, when I really I started to kind of lightly read up on autism, Asperger's, or whatever. And when I started
Lightly.
to, well, it was lightly at first, but then once I started to see the connections, then I dive into it,
Yeah, it was
and
a really rapid.
yeah, and then it was like, okay, yeah, this is. I would say I had almost a year of being pretty confident that I was, and thinking that that's all I would ever reach was just, I'm pretty sure this is what I am, because it is really hard for adults to get diagnosed with
Yeah.
autism. Mainly because anyone who can diagnose autism is hesitant to do it without all these long, rigorous, expensive testing processes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think that it's important that we also talk about how you were diagnosed,
Yeah.
because a lot of people talk about testing, days of testing, and hours, and even months of a process, and money, like all the money that's involved, and insurance and everything. Like, there's so many hurdles to jump through, and it didn't look like that for us.
No.
So I think it's important to address that. And there's also, among the autistic community, and you may even have this in here, but self-diagnosis. There's self-diagnosis, and honestly, I think it's valid, because getting an official diagnosis sometimes in some situations is so hard, and I think that the
Yeah.
recognition still needs to be there.
Pretty much the autistic community is very accepting of even people who are self-diagnosed, because we understand that it's really hard for some people to get diagnosed. It's just the diagnostic process was developed to diagnose children, and so some of these official people that put out, these are all the things you should do to diagnose someone. One of them is, oh well, you have to interview the person's parents at length. You have to interview their teachers at length. You have to like, it's literally stuff that makes it clear that this is aimed at children.
Yeah.
So, and I know that there are services out there that are getting better at doing those kinds of tests for adults, but it's still very expensive.
Yeah.
So, and we weren't really necessarily specifically seeking any kind of official diagnosis.
Yeah.
I think we were kind of in a place where I was just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But I just didn't have that last little bit from a professional who actually had the authority to diagnose it, to say, yeah, you're autistic.
Yeah. And we threw back and forth the ideas of, okay, what does it mean? It's a label, and it's something that we've pretty much already come to terms. Well, I don't know that we can say we've come to terms with it at that point, but something that we've already kind of thought is a real good possibility. But what would it give us?
Right.
Would it give us more resources? Would it help us with anything? Or would an official diagnosis really not make any difference other than just us knowing? So we kind of had to go through that, and I know a lot of other people do too.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that will say, well, why label yourself? What's if it's not going to get you any services, then why worry about it?
Yeah.
And the best explanation for that I've heard is because it matters knowing that you're a zebra, not a weird horse. Like, that makes a huge difference. And that's pretty much what it comes down to. Understanding yourself is the biggest help there. It's the biggest accommodation, really.
Yeah.
Understanding, who you are, and then starting to be able to find resources that give you coping strategies and stuff like that. Like,
Well, that was a huge part of it for me as the support partner, is like finding a way for you to find that balance. For you to find that balance, and for you to like have peace with it and be like the best you that you can be.
Yeah.
It's just like this inner conflict that we were going through, and I hate to see you go through that. I mean, obviously I'm going through it too, because we're in it together, but it's for me it was a big piece of, will it bring you back more to that equilibrium?
Yeah, for sure. And the I think our story, at least for me, shows the importance of the actual diagnosis. That's not to say if you're self-diagnosed and you don't have the resources to get an official diagnosis that's any less valid.
Yeah.
But I I ended up getting diagnosed by my counselor, the counselor that I was going to for therapy, anyways. And I didn't go in there to get diagnosed. We were talking about it in one of my sessions, and I started, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm autistic, and I started to, tell him some of the things that made me feel that way. And he said, "Oh, well, let's pull out the DSM." So he pulls out the DSM-5 and starts reading off the diagnostic criteria. And he like read through it and he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Yep, you're definitely autistic." And just that, that's an official diagnosis. And I feel like sometimes I have to try to defend that to some people anyways. Because it's interesting when you're 40-something years old and you tell someone, I'm autistic, the first thing that they'll ask you is, who told you that?
Yeah.
Which, okay, like if I came up to you and said I have cancer, is the first thing you're going to say, well, who told you that? So,
let me see the doctor's credentials.
Right. But yeah, just that official, you're autistic, like kind of got me the rest of the way there, made it real. And that's what kind of triggered that reprocessing of my entire life. That was kind of going on as I was pretty sure I was autistic, and as I was looking at it as, okay, these things are indicators that I'm autistic. But then getting diagnosed caused me to go back and process all of that from an autistic perspective.
I was going to say,
fully understand.
You say it kind of was going on before, but we're talking about a dripping faucet versus a running faucet.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of opened the floodgates.
Yeah. Like it really did open the floodgates. And it was a roller coaster. I remember driving home from that appointment, like with a tremendous sense of relief. Like it gave me the answer that I was pretty sure we had come to, but didn't have any kind of official, yep, that's the right answer. But yeah, then it sends me through this reprocessing of my life that was really rough for probably, what was it, a couple of weeks probably.
I'd say probably close to 2 or 3 months even.
Yeah. I ended up taking a week off of work because of the effect it was having. Because it made me start, I start thinking about all the parts of my life. And everyone thinks about something that they did 10 years ago and goes, ugh, like kind of thinks that's a little cringy. But you start thinking about your entire life, and you start thinking about all these experiences and these memories that you have, and then you go, okay, they were doing that to an autistic kid.
Yeah,
and
traumatic memories.
It makes it a lot worse. And part of it was also, at first I'm thinking, well, if they had known I was autistic, then maybe things would have been better. They wouldn't have treated me that way. But then you come to the realization of the way they treated me was bad no matter what. They didn't need to know I was autistic to know it was wrong. And that's what is important for people to understand too, particularly late diagnosed autistics, is that it doesn't excuse people that they didn't know you were autistic.
Yeah.
Because they didn't need to know you were autistic to know that the way they were treating you was wrong.
Yeah.
The other things that really shook me and still bothers me today is how my autistic traits were used against me. Like times when I would melt down, oh, he's got an anger problem. Oh, he's a dangerous person or whatever, just from my meltdowns. Or they were used to manipulate me.
Yeah.
People who figured out that they could kind of control my mood, how I react to things.
Mm-hmm.
Basically use those to manipulate me. So, yeah, like I said, and it's hard to. I kept going back and forth between, well, they didn't know that I was autistic, so I can't say that they were exploiting my autism, but they were. They didn't have to know that those traits were autistic traits that they were exploiting. They still knew that if they push this button, they can get this reaction from Keith.
Yeah.
And it's not okay whether you know you're pushing a button that says autism meltdown or just anger.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because this, like, just sitting here and thinking about all this takes me back to the first episode when we were talking about there not being diagnosis available when we were growing up, and me saying that there were, probably kids in my class that I could have pointed out to you that fall into the spectrum. And I think back to how I treated those kids back then. And even then, I was nice to those kids and didn't single them out. And I mean, even if they were excluded by other kids, I don't remember ever pushing them away.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I don't know, it's consistent.
It's like, for me too, I think I kind of started to realize when I was in middle school that I befriended the people that seemed like they were kind of everyone else thought they were quirky and different. And I got along with them and I befriended them. And I even had this thought of oh, I'm a good person because I befriend these people. And now I understand.
They were just like you.
Yeah, we're probably both neurodivergent, and we just got along and understood each other. And I, for some reason, didn't see myself as similar to them, even though these are people that I got along better with than everybody else.
Yeah,
it's just kind of funny.
More the same way. It is interesting.
Kind of funny how that goes. All right, so how did all that look or feel to you? When I was going through that, explain it so that another family member, support, wife, whoever.
Yeah, it was just rough. It was you did all the initial, okay, this might be what it is. And in my mind, I'm going, it all fits. It makes sense. But I kind of let you navigate the journey if you wanted to go that route. And as you got deeper and deeper in, it became challenging to watch you go through it. Once you got the diagnosis, it was really tough because it did turn into reprocessing everything. I remember watching you go through that and just feeling so helpless. It's something you had to go through, but also how can I support and how can I be there? And I remember several times it was just literally being there, physically just being there. I would sit in my chair next to you and just be present. There was nothing to be said. There was nothing I could do. There was no way I could help you, but just to let you know that I was still there.
And yeah, from my perspective, that's what I needed. That's what I knew you could offer that would provide any kind of support to me. Because I knew that you couldn't go back and change things. You can't erase things, and you can't and wouldn't want to stop the reprocessing process, because that's just a normal thing that people who get diagnosed late go through.
Yeah.
And since I was 42 or 43 when I was diagnosed, I had a lot to reprocess.
Yeah.
You're still considered late diagnosis if you're diagnosed as an adult at all. So 19, 20, you're still late diagnosed. And there's a lot to reprocess, I'm sure, because having to go through all of, public school all the way up through high school without knowing that you're autistic, without understanding yourself, that still is going to create a lot for people to process.
Yeah.
But especially when you're, over 40 and you've got all those years to reprocess.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things that I didn't even this didn't come up as me trying to reprocess anything. But I don't know what streaming service it was, but there's a movie out there called Please Stand By. And it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
And it's got Dakota Fanning in it. Mm-hmm. And she plays an autistic girl. They never actually come out and say that she's autistic.
Yeah.
But it's obvious she's autistic.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. And I watched that movie. I started watching it the first time. And it was like a day we were both off. You were upstairs, I think, cleaning our room or something. And I was just already doing the reprocessing, struggling with that. And I started watching the movie, and it was like, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But it was very, very emotional for me watching it.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. Number one, Dakota Fanning looked almost exactly like my daughter.
Yeah.
Like, she looks very similar to my daughter. And so it was kind of rough in the sense of almost watching my daughter go through some of those things.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing, the way she portrays a meltdown, the way she portrays, going through that, she did it very well.
Yeah.
She really portrayed it very well. And it was like, people say autistic people don't have empathy. I was having all kinds of empathy for what she was going through. I was feeling it. People don't realize, we may not be able to read your tone very well. We may not be able to whatever. But if you're hurting, we're hurting with you. It's not even, oh, we can. We will.
Yeah.
If you're hurting, we're going to be hurting with you. And it was like when she was in the movie going through these meltdowns. In fact, there's one point where she's having a meltdown and she just keeps saying, it's too late, it's too late, it's too late. And I can relate to that so much. That is something that will really, really trigger a meltdown, is the idea that it's too late for something that you needed or wanted really badly to happen. And now it's too late. There's no going back.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just remember I was watching that and it was getting really, really emotional. And I texted you and said, I need you to come down and watch the rest of this movie with me. Because I knew I couldn't just leave it there. But I needed you there.
Yeah.
And like you said, basically all you did was sit there with me and watch it. Mm-hmm. But I needed you there.
Yeah. And then we had to go back and watch the whole thing again so I could understand the movie. But it was definitely, I remember that. And there was another time during that time period where, you said you took a week off of work. And I remember being at work one day, and I worked an hour away at the time, mm-hmm. and getting a text message from you that just said, I need you. And mm-hmm. I was able to drop everything I was doing. Thankfully, I had some great coworkers at the time that really were understanding. And my next text to you was, I'm on my way. Yeah. I just dropped everything and got to you as quick as I could. And I don't think we talked about anything that day when I got home. I think I just sat there with you.
I think that was right around the same time I watched that movie.
Might have been.
Because I kept feeling like I needed to keep watching it. It was like a way of me processing things.
Yeah.
And the first time I watched it, it was gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
But I needed to keep watching it to get through it. But yeah, speaking of you leaving work to come and me taking a week off, we were very, very fortunate.
Oh, very. Yeah.
That we each had jobs that we could get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
And my job, my counselor is the one that said, if you need to take a week off, take a week off. And I basically was like, I don't think I have the time. I don't think I had the paid time to do that. I said, would you write a note for my employer telling them I need the time off? And he's like, I'm not sure that they'll take a note from a counselor saying you need a week off. Mm-hmm. But they did.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to go into details why. I didn't have to go into, what was going on. They just knew that a counselor told them I needed a week off. So they, I got the week off.
Yeah.
And Yeah, that was definitely, a lot of people don't have that luxury. There are a lot of jobs, especially for autistic people. They tend to, and like, not all of them, obviously, but um, no matter what job you have, usually your employer knows there's something different about you. And a lot
Yeah.
of times that will almost mean you get less of the benefit of the doubt. You get less special
Kind of
treatment or
more under a
whatever.
microscope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something like that might
Yeah.
cause even more problems at your work. If it's not one of those jobs, like if this had happened while I was still working the ramp, like that job was we don't, like, you come to work.
Yeah.
They basically treated it like if you were sick, that was your fault. It's your job to be healthy. You know.
Well, and we already know that it's hard for a lot of autistic people to keep a job long term, and that all goes back to understanding social cues and social norms and what's expected of you from a boss or a figure of authority, or to work with a team. Like, there's so many things that go into it, so it's already hard enough to get and keep a job and feel like you're being productive and bettering yourself, and then to run into situations like that where you just need a minute to breathe. We were very lucky.
Well, and that's actually a good segue into talking about basically like some of the signs of my autism that we can look back and see, or some of the effects that it had on my life, even though we didn't realize it was autism. And one of those first biggest effects was being able to keep a job. When I was younger, I went, through several jobs. I started out as I think my very first job was a stock boy at Cloth World. I worked there. My brother had worked there. My sister had worked there before me. So, and it was an easy job. And honestly, I left that job because I realized the manager was doing some shady stuff, and I didn't want to be still working there when all of that came out. But no, I before I even knew I had autism, I realized that there seemed to be this pattern going on in my life where I would get into a decent job or a decent position, and then there would be this feeling of stuff building up and building up and building up and building up and building up, and then there would be an explosion. There would be something, that happened. It's not the same thing, and we're not talking about violence. We're not talking about anything like that, but it was big enough to disrupt my job and disrupt my life.
Yeah. Well, from an outsider's perspective, somebody that doesn't know you on an intimate level like I do, you're a big guy. You have a loud voice. You can come across as very assertive in certain situations. So when those moments arise and you feel the need to go into that protective mode, you can be quite intimidating.
Yeah.
And I think that unless, because you don't like to show the gooey soft side of you to other people. Like, I'm sorry I said that on camera. But I don't know, it's just interesting to me to watch other people react to you. And it's like you said earlier, using your autism against you, using burnout against you. Oh, that's anger. No, that's just him not
That's
able
me not
to.
being able to regulate.
Yeah, right.
That's the biggest thing that has been used against me is when I'm melting down, I lose volume control.
Yeah.
Even in those situations, it's just noise, like you said. But it's been used against me because I'm a big guy and I'm yelling now. And it's not that much more of a leap in people's minds to think that I must be violent.
Yeah. And long before your diagnosis, early on in our marriage, I remember not knowing really how to navigate it and not knowing you as well as I know you now. And we had, normal couple argument one time, and I remember you getting loud, and I was just like, for me, it's like escape the situation because I have to process. And I went to go into the room, and you saw me as coming at you, like trying to attack you. And literally you just tried to give me a bear hug so I didn't attack you. That's how scary you are in those moments. It's literally all noise. There's nothing physical to it. You'll defend yourself by trying to dampen the threat, but you're not going to come out swinging or throwing punches or anything. It's just,
Right.
there's no physical element to it. It's all just volume. And
That particular incident that you're talking about was like a big whoa moment for both of us, because we were both triggered about past experiences,
Yep.
past relationship that you had been in, past relationship that I had been in, and like you said, yeah, it wasn't even a conscious thing. My brain saw you. I think we were actually in the room and you were trying to leave, and I was standing near the door. I wasn't trying to block you at all, but the way you were coming at me, my brain took that as you're about to get hit. And the way I would defend myself in those situations was the first thing I'd do is close the gap. If someone doesn't have enough swing room to get their arm or their fist really moving, then it's not going to hit as hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the other things that I would do to defend myself is just bear hug the person.
Yeah.
Like,
and to me, coming from my past, it was a history of abuse and feeling trapped and feeling, not just feeling that way, but actually being physically confined in some ways, and you closing the gap and me feeling like you weren't going to let me, through. It was just definitely a moment for both of us. I think it's a huge way that we learned to communicate through those things, because everybody has a past. Everybody
it helped
has
us
trauma.
to understand to give each other some grace.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we know, especially by that point, most people probably don't know our story. We got married very quickly. I had been married twice before. You had been married before. We come from LDS background, Mormon, if you don't know what LDS stands for. And it's not uncommon to get married quickly.
Yeah.
In like the LDS culture. And we both, I think, were, you had 3 young boys. You're a single mom trying to deal with that. I had young kids. It was like, number one, we needed somebody. We each needed somebody, but it wasn't just anybody, obviously. Yeah. We weren't just running out there to do. But even so, we've told our kids, don't do what we did.
Right.
We lucked out. Yeah. And it wasn't we lucked out on the first try, because obviously, we'd gotten married pretty quick in our previous marriages, and those did not work out.
Yeah. So
even our own personal statistics say don't do that.
Yeah.
We just happened to luck out when we got together that we each were who we were.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for other people to take advantage of us.
Yeah.
If we were like that.
People ask me all the time how we met, and I always hesitate to answer because I'm not going to lie to them, but we met on the internet. But I always say, but I don't recommend it. Don't, we just got lucky.
It's funnier than that. We didn't just meet on the internet. We met on LDS chat. And we were both raised in an LDS world. And by that point, I no longer considered myself Mormon. I had actually had my name removed from the records. And I don't think you necessarily considered yourself not Mormon anymore, but you were definitely not very active and not as devout as I had been when I was. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we were still getting to know each other. Like, yeah, we very much were strangers. We got married 3 months after we first started talking.
And this is 3 months of long distance relationship. Right. I was still in Utah and you were in Ohio. Mm-hmm. So we met talking on November 13th. The first time we met in person was Christmas Day of that same year. So
best Christmas present I ever got.
About a month later, we spent a week together. I came home on New Year's. And then at the beginning of February, you came to Utah to visit me and meet my family. Mm-hmm. Was it the beginning of February? It would have been the end of February because we came back with you.
No, you were going to come back with me. That's a whole other story.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was the beginning of February. Yeah,
and then because it was the end of February when you guys
we actually came to Ohio and we got married on March 1st. So it was very quick, November 13th to March 1st. Mm-hmm. And we did not know each other at all.
No. what we both did ended up working, but it only ended up working because we both were doing it. And basically what we did is we just laid all of our cards out. This is what I've got. This is the baggage I'm carrying. This is the life I come from. This is the history I have. Mm-hmm. We both just laid it all out on the table, and it was like, this is what I got. What do you got? Can we make something with this?
Well, and I think your autism plays into that. We obviously didn't know at the time, but you were just like, I'm honest, I'm genuine, I'm authentic, and this is who I am. Yeah. And that's kind of just my personality too. When I'm in those situations, is what you see is what you get. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty boring, basic person, but I'm not fake at all. Yeah. And I think that just worked well together.
Yep. So anyways, talk more about some of the signs. So a lot of the reprocessing that I did and learning about typical autistic traits, the ones that are pretty common across the board, because autistic experience is as varied as there are. There's as many different autistic experiences as there are autistic people. Mm-hmm. But there are some traits and some experiences that are common among them. One of the first ones is meltdowns, like we talked about. And the fact that those meltdowns were mistaken for anger. Mm-hmm. Or even rage. Mm-hmm. I used to talk about how one of the things that I used to be like, I got my anger problems from my dad. I got my anger management issues from my dad. And what that was, I believe I got from my dad, because I believe my dad's autistic as well. Mm-hmm. And he's undiagnosed. He might even take offense to me saying I think he's autistic, but it's not certainly what I wouldn't try to offend someone else by saying they're what I am.
No,
it's just I believe that's the case, and so
an acknowledgement of the situation.
But again, those were what I now recognize as meltdowns were seen as anger management problems and mm-hmm. rage. Related to meltdowns is burnout. Mm-hmm. And I now realize that the explosion that drastically affected my life, my job, or whatever, my relationship, were burnout.
Yeah.
So meltdowns are when you're overstimulated, you're pushed to the point where you lose the ability to regulate, and you might have outbursts. You might basically, a meltdown is going to be more like putting things out, whether it's see, this is what a good ESA does.
She knows.
But yeah, meltdown is more like the anger's coming out, the whatever's coming out. It's more of an outward thing from me anyways. My meltdowns are that way. Once I'm in burnout, it's like I'm not putting anything out there.
Yeah.
There's burnout and there's shutdown, and those, for me, those are kind of similar. Burnout is almost like the phase between the two, kind of.
Yeah. When you get into burnout, shutdown's not far behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those times when I would go into burnout, I didn't have the energy to do anything. I didn't have the desire to do it. And so that was always mistaken for depression and laziness, basically. And I think that's a common thing that autistics get diagnosed with depression, and it is a comorbidity for sure anyways.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times burnouts or shutdowns or whatever are seen as evidence of depression when it's not depression that's fueling it.
That's driving it, yeah. But the depression is valid too, because it's easy to be depressed and stressed out when the world you live in doesn't fit you.
Right.
When everything around you is, so that's valid too.
Yeah.
It's just there's definitely some overlap, and I think it's so important to see with so many of these autistic traits is there's overlap into like the anger and what you say. And earlier you were talking about being empathetic and feeling other people's feelings. I think there's a lot of I don't even know what they're called, what it's called, but like narcissistic personality disorder and things like that are hidden behind an autism label. And a lot of the traits that come out with narcissism aren't true to autism.
Right.
So it's like, okay, the behaviors this person is exhibiting, maybe you're looking at something more here, because my experience, and I'm obviously not a professional, we've said that before, but is autistic people aren't hateful and mean like
Right.
that. It's just yeah, there's just some overlap, and you have to be careful with what.
Well, there's a lot of people that I think believe there's more of an overlap there than there is.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that I would read when I was first starting to, wonder, to think I was autistic, there were some things where people would like compare autistic people to narcissists. And there's some people that will say, well, autistic people they only care about themselves. They don't have the ability to care about other people. No, that's a narcissist.
Yeah.
That's not an autistic person.
You get
And
to
it is-
burnout and meltdown
yeah.
because you care about everybody
Exactly.
else but yourself.
Exactly.
That's-
And that's true. Like those
Yeah.
those times when I was in burnout, I don't like to say it like I'm trying to be some kind of martyr, but most of my life has been exerting effort for other people's comfort. Whether that effort is being exerted simply to, I didn't realize it then, but to not be who I was
Yeah.
because it wasn't comfortable for other people for me to be that, or whether it was me just sacrificing my needs or wants for other people's.
Yeah.
For sure. And, this isn't even necessarily in the order we were going to talk about it, but since you brought up the confusion between narcissism and autism, just a couple years ago now, I, was trying to get established with a new counselor in the area we live now that we moved to from Ohio. We live in the Dallas area. And I went to a first session with a counselor, and it was a man probably in his 70s. Didn't do counseling full time anymore, but still would have a couple of patients. And the very beginning of the session, I explained to him that I was autistic, that some of the things that I was dealing with was still like certain people in my life still trying to use that against me, still trying to exploit that for their benefit and my detriment. That's still the case today as we speak. But even from him, when I said I'm autistic, well, who told you that? Well, my counselor diagnosed me. And he said, oh, it seems like that's just the trendy thing to do these days. And that was probably 5 minutes into that appointment. And in my head, I went, I'm not coming back here. But I also wasn't at the point of getting up and walking out yet, necessarily. And the rest of the appointment was pretty good. It was kind of a typical counseling appointment. And at the end, he announced to me, as though he was doing me a favor, as though it was good news, that he didn't think I was autistic. Because I clearly cared very deeply for my family and my children. And autistic people only care about themselves. That's what he told me. And I was like, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Because that's how misunderstood it still is. That a person in the mental health community has such backwards misconceptions about it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I actually reached out to my brother. My brother's a clinical psychologist, and asked him, shouldn't people better understand that? And basically what he said was, there's no topic requirement for their CEUs that they have to get. They can get CEUs in any specialty, any specific aspect of psychology out there. So like, there's nothing saying that anyone has to read up on autism.
Yeah.
Which is kind of yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, so some of the other things that we noticed, big one, black and white thinking.
Yes.
This is one of them that it's best explained from your perspective, I think, because that's just how I think, and I still don't think I can fully understand and appreciate the difference between my black and white thinking and neurotypical thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what are some examples of that?
I'm going to give
that you even saw like early on?
I'm going to give a really funny example.
Okay.
And it seems silly, but it's very much a perfect example of black and white thinking, and there's a lot of different ways that you exhibit it. But my favorite example, and I had to learn this early on in our marriage, was playing Phase 10 with Keith.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
I grew up playing Phase 10. My friends, my family, we just played Phase 10 a lot. So if you're not familiar with the game, when you have 10 cards in your hand, and every turn that you take, you pick up a card from the stack, so you have 11, and then you try to get your set, which is 10 different phases, so whichever set you're on. And if you do get your set, you lay it down on the table while you have 11 cards in your hands, because that's during your turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you discard, your turn is over.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of your turn, you put a card that you don't want anymore face up on the pile. Well, there are times in that game when, say, you're going for a run of 9, and you have 11 cards in your hand, but you have a run of 11 in your hand. You have all 11 cards in order.
A run, so like 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yes.
whatever. Yeah.
Cards in order. So, if you have that in your hand, and that's your phase, you cannot lay down 11 cards on the table because you didn't end your turn by discarding. You can only lay down a run of 10, and you have to discard one of those.
Well, you can't. So for me, it's Phase 10. You have 10 cards in your hand. You cannot have a run of 11 in a game where you're only supposed to have 10 cards in your hand.
See, we've
That's
been
my
through
line.
this.
Yeah. And it's part of it is, you didn't finish your turn. But the other part is, like, to me, saying run of 11 in Phase 10 is like saying I win poker because I have 5 aces. You can't have 5 aces. And you can't have a run of 11.
It's just so funny to me, but it's a perfect example of black and white thinking.
She still does it just to pick
I
at me
don't.
anyways.
I really try not to when I'm playing with you. And the kids have even asked, what's the big deal? And I'm like, there's really not a big deal, but when you're playing with Dad, that's how it's done. And it doesn't make a difference whether you lay that card down in front of you or put it on the discard pile. You still went out in your mind. So just do it the way that Dad's mind can resolve it.
Yep.
So,
because you can't have a run of 11.
anyways, that's just a perfect example of
the
black and white thinking. And that's what I thought of when I saw that. I was like, that's totally my example. But I mean, there are more serious things that we deal with in everyday life.
Well, there's a lot of black and white thinking of right and wrong for me.
Yes.
And I have, it's something that in some ways I'm like kind of beginning to understand that and trying to be better about that. And in other ways I'm like, no, you guys are still wrong.
Yeah.
Neurotypicals are wrong when it comes to this. One of those things has to do with the truth, honesty, dishonesty, or whatever. There seems to be like this unwritten rule that a certain level of dishonesty is not only okay, but sometimes is what you should do. It's how you should be. Being too honest is sometimes seen as rude sometimes.
Yeah.
I've lost friendships because I was just I was just saying what was true and saying how I felt, and it wasn't meant to put anyone down. I was just being authentically me. And, oh, well, how dare you talk to me like that? How dare you say something like that to me? And I'm like, okay, what did you want me to lie to you? Well, apparently, yeah, that's the expectation in the neurotypical world.
Yeah.
But in the neurodivergent world, why would you want me to lie to you?
Right.
The best service you can do to me is be honest with me no matter what.
Right.
Like in my mind, if I'm saying something that's wrong, I want to be corrected.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm really wrong, because I want to know that I'm wrong and I want to be able to correct it. I don't want to be saying something that I strongly believe is true and isn't, and for people who are hearing me say it to know that I'm wrong but not say anything about it, because in that case they're just, oh, he's wrong, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And like, no, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny, like even in our marriage, like there's some questions that women ask to men that aren't safe questions, like, do these pants make my butt look big, right? And it's funny to me because your experience in navigating relationships and marriage has taught you those situations.
Mm-hmm.
So when I ask questions like that, you're really good about like turning it into kind of a joke. Usually that's what you do. It's either like danger, danger, or it's a trap.
Yeah.
And then I know, okay, that wasn't a reasonable question for me to ask. So we're able to navigate those situations, but you still, even if you turn it into a joke, you won't lie.
No.
Because
But the funny thing is you might say, does this outfit make me look this way? And it's not a question in your mind. It's not, does it make me look ugly or whatever? Mm-hmm. If you ever ask me, does this make me look ugly? I can tell you the answer is going to always be truthfully no.
Yeah.
Because I can't see you that way.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I know that, so I know there's no point in me asking that question.
But if you're asking me that, usually it's in a case when we're about to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So, in my mind, you're asking that question because you want to know how you'll be viewed by other people when we're out and about. Right. And again, in my mind, the best service I can do for you is answer that honestly.
To be honest, right?
So that you understand, so that you can make a decision as to whether you want to change something or whatever. I don't care. Like it. I mean, when we've gotten spiffed up and dressed up nice and gone to like the orchestra or something. Like I love that. You're gorgeous when we do that, but you don't need to do that for me to, to still think you're beautiful anyways.
You react the same way when I had long hair and pull it back in a ponytail and put on jeans and a t-shirt. Mm-hmm. Like so you've always been really good about that. But yeah, no, I'd much rather somebody say to me, hey, did you know that sure has a hole in the back of it?
Right.
Before I go out in public and then realize it when I get home later that night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who saw this? Yeah. And now I feel stupid.
Yeah, I've always told people, like, if my zipper's down, if I have something in my teeth, tell me now. You might not want to tell me because you think I'll be embarrassed. I'm going to be a lot more embarrassed when I get home at the end of the day and find out I've been walking around with my zipper down for who knows how long, and I don't know how many people saw it.
Yeah.
That's a lot more embarrassing to me than one person going, hey, your zipper's down.
Because that's happened to everybody.
Yeah. And I can even turn that into a funny situation, like, oh, sorry, like, like it just kind of is what it is. But I'd rather know now than find out later that a lot of other people probably knew and I was just walking around clueless about it. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big theme in my life is I don't like looking back and realizing I was clueless and other people around me knew it.
Yeah.
And
you've said to me before that it makes you feel like a chump.
Yeah.
And that other people see you that way. Yeah. And nobody wants to feel that way.
Right. So that's definitely a good talk about the black and white thinking. Another thing, special interests. Mm-hmm. Special interest is definitely a very common thread, not even just with autistic people, but like in the neurodivergent, ADHD or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's pretty common. And I definitely had special interests. I definitely had, I understood pretty early on that if it wasn't something I was interested in, my brain was not going to engage in it. And that is a very big autistic trait.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I hate my job, but, I just do it so I can get by. I cannot do that.
Yeah.
It will not work. My brain will not engage. I, at one point, tried majoring in finance and management, or was it? No, finance and marketing. Nope.
And then you did hotel and restaurant
And then I
management.
did hotel and restaurant management.
That was a no.
That was slightly better than the other two, but still nope. And like, yeah, I didn't care. Like I didn't have the ability to engage. And then I went to EMT school and breezed through that because EMS and firefighting were one of my special interests.
Yeah.
And I'll still tell people I'm a really, really lucky person because I've been able to work in like dream jobs, like that I dreamed about being when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a firefighter ever since I was in kindergarten. And my parents will grow out of that because most little boys want to be firefighters.
Yeah,
But
right.
obviously most don't grow up to be that. But I wanted to be that, and I became a firefighter. And I was, I was working in the emergency services, either as a firefighter, an EMT, or a 911 dispatcher for 17 years.
When we met, you
Yeah.
were working full-time as a firefighter, making how much an hour?
$11.50 an hour.
$11.50 an hour. You were working a 24/48 schedule.
Yep.
And I mean, money was tight and starting out was rough, but I remember thinking several times and even saying to people, you know what, he loves his job and he comes home and he doesn't bring it with him. And I can't ask for more than that. So that was a big thing for me is, yeah, you weren't making very much at the time, but you never complained about your job. You loved what you did.
Yeah, I did. I loved going to work. I loved being the person that other people called when they needed help, and I loved being able to be the one to help them.
Yeah, it's very
And I
fulfilling.
still miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that a lot. I am not in a position physically to be able to do that job anymore anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved that job. And yeah, I always told people, I was like, I'm not doing this for the money. If I was after money, this is not the job to have to be after money. Even if I was actually getting paid what what some of the other firefighters in our department were getting paid, because everybody worked the same full-time schedule, but some of us were called shifted part-time. And basically all that meant was you're working the same schedule, you're doing the same job, but you're getting about half pay.
Literally.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but even if I was in the other position, it's regular pay for a firefighter is not worth it if all you're looking for money. It is money.
Yeah.
You become a firefighter because it's who you are.
Right.
And they always say that, like, once a firefighter, always a firefighter. I still very much have a firefighter mentality. We have a lot of firefighter stuff in our house because that's still very much who I am.
Yep.
But like I said, I get to kind of work two dream jobs. Another one of my special interests was aviation, airplanes. My two favorite toys as a kid was my fire truck and my Fisher-Price airplane. Remember those
Yeah.
Fisher-Price little people airplanes? And I mean, I would have them coming in on a perfect glide slope, going into land. Like, I would always play with that. I had a really, like, one of those really basic, cheap plastic toys that, you could still get them in stores for like maybe $2. Those were some of the best toys. And I had an Army helicopter. That was one of those. That was a lot of fun that I played with.
Yeah.
In fact, it's funny. Your dad loved the show MASH. And as a kid, I loved the show MASH.
Yep.
But in reality, I loved the opening of the show MASH. That was it. With the helicopters coming in, it combined, aviation with helicopters coming in, EMS with them, working to help people. One of the things that I always also kind of credit with getting me interested in EMS and that side of things was that my oldest brother is my half brother from my dad's first marriage, and his mom was a flight nurse with the local life flight, and she would come over after her shift to pick up Brian, and she'd come in and sit and talk with my parents for a little bit. They actually had a pretty civil relationship and would talk. And so she'd come in her flight nurse uniform with all the little, scissors and all the shears and everything. And I just thought that was cool as shit. Like, I thought that was so cool. And I wanted to be wearing the pants with the scissors and the shears and everything.
Yeah.
So
You got some of that in EMS, but
Yep.
not the flight part of it.
no.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of my other special interest, music
Music's
has
always been one.
a huge one.
Yep. You love recording, singing with the kids, and like breaking songs into different parts and recording them. And
And that was another trait about that I didn't even realize was different than most people. Was the ability to I can listen to a song and like pull the parts out
hear all the different
and
parts
hear all the different parts
individually.
instead of just. And I remember one time you saying that's not normal,
You realize
and I'm
that's
like,
not
what are you
normal,
talking
right?
about? And you're like, I just hear the song.
Yeah.
I'm like, so it's just all one big thing to you? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not how my brain is doing it.
And you don't just do it with singing, but you do it with musical instruments too, which is
Yeah, I can listen to like an orchestra and I can like pick a part to focus on. And it's almost like I can pull that part out and I can listen to it. And the rest of it's going on, but it's like, it's almost like in my head, I've turned the volume down to everything but like the trumpet in this part or whatever.
yeah.
And it's also helpful because I used to also like to play with MIDI on the computer. I had like a software called Noteworthy Composer. And I would just listen to songs and then write them in the Noteworthy Composer
Yeah.
from listening to them. So I could listen to the song and pull out the different parts and write each different part on its own line and then have it play the song through MIDI, and it's basically the song.
Yeah,
You know?
and as in-depth as you go with music, it's very interesting to me, and I want to point this out, that you also play some piano songs from memory, but you don't read music.
No.
You read rhythm because of your years of playing
Because I was a
percussion,
percussionist, yep.
but you don't read like music.
Like musical notes
So,
don't come to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can look at it and I can go, that's an A, that's a whatever. I can't
like
can't
read and play a
read
piano
and play it
piece.
at the same time. Yeah.
Before you move on to the next thing, I want to bring up, because it's funny too, special interests, trying new special interests has always been, he knows where I'm going with this, has always been a fun thing, but usually he knows that that's what he wants to do, but he has always enjoyed watching Bob Ross paint. And I think it was during
He's a
COVID.
charlatan.
I think it was during COVID, he went on a Bob Ross stretch. Him and one of our sons
Yep.
really got into watching Bob Ross, and he went, I think I could paint. And
He
so,
makes it seem like his whole shtick
That's
is
the whole-
painting is easy.
yeah.
And follow my simple steps.
So for Christmas, you got like brushes and canvases and some paints, and you had this whole thing set up in the basement. And I remember coming home from work one day, and you're like, Bob Ross is a charlatan.
Yep.
And the
It did not work as easily as
the
he.
painting stuff is in a box in the garage, and it says dreams of a painter that never were.
Yep. I still think someday I might try pulling those out and just try doing whatever I feel like doing on it
Instead of trying to replicate Bob Ross.
Instead of trying to
Probably
replicate
a
Bob
better
Ross.
idea.
And that way, whatever it ends up being, who cares? Because I could still see that being a relaxing thing for me, but it would only be a relaxing thing for me now. Like back then, it was like, nope, get all this stuff out of my face now. I'm frustrated. I was expecting
The vision you had
Yep.
of it was so much
I had this
different.
idea
Yep.
of how it
Yep.
was going to look, and like, oh, I'll be able to look like I actually know what I'm doing. Nope, I do not, and I couldn't even fake it. Like
It was great.
that's see. As the years have gone on, we've realized that I'm not just autistic. I'm probably what we call ADHD. So there's a mix of autism and ADHD. So when you have that, you have special interests, but you also have some special interests that are like, hey, that seems cool. Let me get into that. Nope.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to this. You know, so like I have special interests that are never going to go away, but I also have things that will pop up that'll be like, you know, like even the kids will be like, oh, so you're on that kick right now,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
and I'll be like, yep, apparently, and it may or may not last very long. Who knows?
Yep.
So, and yep, painting specifically trying to paint like Bob Ross. That was one of those things.
Yep. Oh, goodness.
So another one of them was rigorous rule following. This is
We kind of
very
already
close
talked
to the
about that
black and
some.
white. That's kind of why
Yeah.
it's like, rigorous rule following.
Yeah.
And it's not just like for games,
No.
but like for everything
Yeah.
almost. Probably except the speed limit, but nobody ever really fully wants. I'm not as bad as she is, but
Wow.
but no, it's like it's not even just that I feel like we should all follow the rules, but a lot of people don't. But I've also learned that if I'm trying to figure out, okay, we autistics always feel like there's these unwritten rules that everyone else seems to understand, that we're like, where is this rule book? Please show it to us so we can understand it. But that rule book doesn't even apply to us anyways. Because there have been a lot of times where I'm like, oh, so this is the rule, but this is what everyone really does. Okay, I'll just do what everyone really does. And then I do what everyone really does, and nope, you broke the rule. And somehow I'm the one who, like you're the bad guy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but literally everybody does this. I was just trying to go along with what everyone else does.
Go with the flow of traffic.
Right. So it's not even a case of I didn't learn this unwritten rule unless there's a whole lot more, fine
Sometimes.
print to that rule that everyone still understands and I don't. It feels like it doesn't even apply to us. And I think some of that, had no plans of bringing this up, but it just came to my mind. Some of that could be attributed to another guy in the autistic community who actually did the artwork for our logo. His name is Nathan McConnell. He does a growing up body comic, which is pretty cool. But he also is talking about this idea of the Uncanny Valley. And what that mostly based on is the idea that AI could never fully imitate humans. Like there's always going to be something about AI that's going to be off that'll be enough to make people realize there's a difference. And he's basically saying that applies to autistic people too. Like we don't even have to like be around someone for very long. We don't have to interact with them for very long. Sometimes it's just we walk into a room and there's just something different about us to some people. And that something different makes them react different to us. It makes them watch us closer. It makes them, whatever. Like he talks about times where he's walked into like a store and somebody like almost literally gasps because there's just something different about him. And he's not like, Quasimodo walking around. He's a normal looking guy. There's nothing that should do that, but it's I think that kind of plays into that. So it's almost like even if I'm trying to follow the rules that everyone else in society seems to follow, the people that are going to enforce those rules are like, there's something fishy about you. So we're not even going to let, you have to actually follow the rules and not, So.
Interesting.
So shout out to Nathan. I already told him we were doing this and gave him a heads up. So.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Next thing is masking. This was a huge thing. So, masking is basically where it's what autistic people do, whether consciously or subconsciously, to get by in a neurotypical world. And basically, there's different kinds of masking. There's either just like pretending to not be bothered by stuff. Some people, when they mask, they basically kind of just mirror the mannerisms of the people around them.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for autistic people to start speaking in the same accent that the people they're around, and it's not even a conscious thing. It's like, you start talking with someone who's very Southern, and you start getting a drawl in your voice, and you don't even like realize it.
Yeah.
I get that sometimes because I grew up in Houston and
Yeah.
I grew up in the South, and so sometimes my drawl comes back if I'm around other people that are Malla.
She wants to play.
Yeah. But realizing that I remember trying to explain to other people, this is how the world works. None of us really feel this way. We just pretend to be this way. And that's just how you get through the world. And then I learned that's not actually the case. Most people aren't actually faking that. Like, that's just how they are. Again, like in my case, I think it was mostly, not a conscious thing that I was doing.
It's just adjustments to fit in.
Yeah, but it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It is so exhausting. And I didn't even realize how exhausting it was until I realized what was going on. All I knew growing up is that I was just always exhausted. I couldn't understand how does just existing seem to take so much more energy and be so much more difficult for me than everybody else around me. It must be something wrong with me. Oh, I must have some kind of character flaw. But it's just, I was having to exert so much energy just to exist.
Yeah.
And once I realized that's what was going on, and to some extent stopped doing that, it's when I realized just how exhausting it was.
Yeah.
Now, I still have to do that at times.
Yeah. Well, I hear stories about people finding out that they're autistic and unmasking and some of the challenges that presents. And we've had kind of in-depth conversations about it. And like, what does unmasking mean to you? And do you ever feel like you ever want to go completely unmasked? And I think that your view on it is in some situations you'll always find it necessary.
Yeah.
Like work situations or social situations, sometimes it just will always be. But at home, in your safe space, you don't want to have to.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of...
And it's, yeah. This is like the first relationship I've been in. This is the first home I've been in where I can feel safe enough at home to not feel like I have to mask.
Yeah.
The other thing is that when you are a late diagnosed autistic, like I am, you get to a point where you're like, well, who am I then? Is my whole personality a mask? What part of that is a mask and what part of it isn't? It's really hard to take off a mask when it has kind of melded to your face, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is when you're in your 40s and find out that you're autistic and that, yeah, you've been masking a lot, but if you take off the mask, what's there? What's left? How much, like if you pull off the mask, will that pull off some of the real you or vice versa?
Yeah.
It's just, and I think that's something that I'm still, kind of dealing with.
Yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people in relationships that are late diagnosed deal with. And I've heard from like support groups and things that I'm a part of is the unmasking and going, do I really know this person? It's not the same person that I was with before. And to be fair, in some degree, it's not.
Yeah.
But it's not fair to ask them to continue to be something that they're just pretending to be in the first place. And it's not their fault either. But it's been one of my real fears going through this is I never want to ask you to mask or be something that you're not, especially at home. And what does that look like? Like, is that somebody I don't know? And is it going to become that? And obviously it hasn't. We've kept the lines of communication pretty open through the whole process. But in some situations and a lot of real life relationships, that is a problem. And that's a challenge that people deal with. So I definitely feel like it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about masking that I want people to understand, though, is that masking is not for our benefit. We are not masking for our benefit, except that maybe it's just a case of it keeps the attention off of us.
Yeah,
it
passive
doesn't,
least resistance.
Yeah. So that's kind of for our benefit, but mostly our masking is to make other people comfortable.
Yeah.
And in a ideal world, no one should have to do that. Everyone should just be able to be who they are, and everyone else accept that.
Yeah.
Okay, another one of the things, stimming. So this is when I was first really starting to learn about common traits in autism and learned about stimming. I was like, yeah, I have been doing that my entire life. I tap on everything. I drum on everything. I chew on almost everything. Like, I'm twiddling my thumbs. Like, little things like this even is stimming. And it's funny because it's fun, I guess not ha-ha funny, but we talked about in the first episode that my mom worked with autistic kids. And so she had a lot of experience with that, but it was more high support needs autistic kids. And when I was going through this, self-discovery, at one point I told her, I think I might be autistic. And she was like, oh, no, you're not autistic. And one of the first things I was like, but I've been stimming my entire life. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody stims a little bit. Was that the camera?
Yes.
Yep. The camera just shut off. So, this may just be an audio podcast this week, or this episode. So stimming, yeah, that was definitely one of the things that I saw. Kind of one of the last ones we were going to talk about is sensory issues.
Yeah.
Sound is a big sensory issue for me. Mm-hmm. I can hear everything, and it's like I can't put some of it aside and just ignore it, which is funny because when it comes to music, I can pull the pieces out and focus on one. It's not that I'm ignoring the rest, but I'm focusing on this one. But those are all different sounds that go together.
It's an organized sound.
Yeah, it's an organized sound. If I walk into a grocery store and it's really busy, that's a whole bunch of sound that doesn't work with each other. It's consonant, it's dissonant, it doesn't go together. Mm-hmm. And so that creates there's just too much going on there.
Yeah.
For me especially.
Yep.
Any
No.
What are some sensory things that you've noticed about me?
Mainly the sound thing, just sometimes light.
Oh, you know what else?
You need darkness.
Texture is a big thing, particularly with food.
And clothing.
But I hate tomatoes. And I hate tomatoes because of those slimy little seeds that are in it. That's probably the biggest problem with tomatoes. That's why if I ask for a sandwich and I ask them to not put the tomatoes on, and they do it, I've learned to go back and be like, you put tomatoes on this, I need a new sandwich. And they'll reach for the sandwich that I have, and I'll be like, I'll hold on to this until you make me a new sandwich, so that you don't go behind the wall and just take the tomatoes off, because it's still going to leave those slimy little seeds on there anyways, and that's what I don't want.
Yep.
I have no problem with ketchup. I have no problem with tomato sauce. I have no problem with almost every other tomato soup. Is I love tomato soup, but
just not fresh tomatoes.
Cannot do fresh tomatoes. Yeah, I can even handle salsa. Stewed tomatoes.
Can you do salsa?
Yep, salsa. Yep.
Yeah.
But fresh tomatoes, no.
That's kind of funny.
That's a big no.
But yep.
The other big thing that I started to. The other part of the reprocessing is the what ifs. What if I had been diagnosed as a child? Mm-hmm. What would have happened? Would that have given me more support? Would I have gotten more support that I needed and possibly been able to do better in life, to succeed better in life? Mm-hmm. Or would that have been seen as a reason to not expect as much from me?
I think the answer to all of that is yes. It's kind of the in my old job, when people would start going down a trail of what if, I would always come back to, we could play the what if game all day. This is what we're dealing with now. This is what we have in our hand, and you were late diagnosed. You can't live in the what if you were diagnosed early in life. Would you have gotten more support? Because I think the answer is yes, but it would have also been more difficult for you in a lot of ways. And the non-diagnosed till you were older road led you to where you're at now. So what if is a slippery slope.
Yep, for sure.
It's a natural thing to wonder. I just think it's a slippery slope, and we need to catch ourselves and not.
Right, and that's part of the roller coaster of the reprocessing, because you can slip down that slippery slope, but then go, you know what, it doesn't matter. Because one of the things that I've said, especially now, is that I wouldn't want to change anything in the past. Mm-hmm. because I am really happy with where we are right now.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with our relationship. I'm really happy with our job situation. And I don't know what one little thing being changed in the past would mean that we never met, or that we wouldn't be where we are now.
Yeah.
So I can look back and go, there's a lot of things that happened to me that were wrong and should not have.
Yeah.
But at this point, I wouldn't go back and change it. That doesn't mean that anyone who mistreated me is off the hook.
No.
You know, it's kind of like it's similar to, you know, I'm no longer a firefighter because of shady stuff that other people did. Because, like I said, we were the group of firefighters I was in were doing the same job as the others and getting paid less. And when we finally fought for equal treatment, that's when I ended up getting laid off.
Yeah.
Very, very conveniently. And I fought that as discrimination all the way up to the State Employee Relations Board in Ohio. And lost that fight.
Yeah.
So that's what caused me to need to just have a complete career change. That's what caused me to be able to get into the aviation and eventually get to the job that I have now, that I thoroughly enjoy and make really good money at. So I remember one time just talking with my sister and being, you know, like, I think it was something like, it's like halfway through February and I've already made as much this year as I did it a whole year as a firefighter. And she made the comment of, well, then I guess you should thank them for laying you off. And I was like, no, I'm not thinking. They screwed me over.
Yeah.
They don't get credit for the fact that I picked myself back up
Right.
and ended up in a better situation than I was.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what advice would you have for other loved ones, partners, of someone who is late diagnosed? Having gone through what you went through, what are some things that you wish you had known? What are some things that you found work well for you?
I think a lot of it I've kind of touched on, but part of it is just like being there. One of the biggest things I think is learning how to communicate, talking things through. Like, I actually have learned through this that I have to like tell you what my needs are. And I sometimes have to ask you directly, okay, what do you need right now? Or tell me how I can help you, because sometimes everything I do to help doesn't help, and I'm like feeling so helpless, and really all I have to do is just use my voice and say, what can I do to help? And sometimes the answer is nothing.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing you can do right now to help me. And just like putting in that constant effort and being present. And one of the things that I probably lacked in that I could do better, but I definitely recommend, is like learning as much as you can about autism and different types of autism and like traits.
Well, I was diving into it and then info dumping on you about it.
Yeah.
So I can understand why, in your case, you probably felt overwhelmed by it all in the first place. So.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways it was overwhelming, but I'm not saying that in a negative way, but you're probably right. That's probably why I didn't dig into it myself more.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being support and being flexible. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many times when things come up in our everyday life, and I just have to be like, okay, I'm the one that can process this mentally. And a perfect example of this was one day you're getting ready to go to work, and the container that you use to put your food in there's not one in the cabinet that's clean. And there's some in the fridge with leftovers in them, and you can't use the bigger container because it doesn't fit in your lunchbox right, and it's not part of your routine. And so my mind, my non-autistic, having a near meltdown mind, goes, okay, we'll move the food in the fridge, in the leftovers, into the bigger container and wash the smaller container so you can take it to work. And, you know, like, I just stepping in some of those situations and being like, you know what, I I can make this better. I can help this
Yeah.
instead of making it worse. Like, oh, just take the bigger container. Like, there's no reason to fight those battles.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, I can make your day easier and it makes my day easier. Let's just solve this problem.
Yeah, because that's another autistic thing that's very common is we like to know what's going to happen. We like to have the plan. We like to we have expectations for how things are going to go based on, just how we think it should go or how it normally would go. So when something that simple, it's like a roadblock in my brain, it was like a roadblock.
Yeah.
And stepping out of it and not actually facing that right now, but being able to look at it from the outside, I understand that to someone who isn't autistic, they could go, "You're just being ridiculous."
Yeah.
And it is. There's a level of ridiculousness to it, but it's just how our brain works.
Yeah, you're just.
And
not
I remember
processing it the same way.
that was just a roadblock. It was just okay. Now,
once I stepped in and solved it, you were
Yep.
back on track. You were fine. So it's like little things like that. I mean, they seem little, but I think it's important also to find balance, self-care. As the partner, you have to also prioritize taking care of yourself, and it can be a tricky balance to navigate, but it's important to keep your voice and make sure your needs are known. And it's okay for you to have needs too, even though you're dealing with this very specific autistic thing and your partner has very specific regimented needs. It's okay for you to have needs too.
Yeah.
And you can work through those together and figure out what that looks like, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to get counseling, and it's okay to take medications if you need help, and it's okay to talk to people. And the only thing I would caution is a lot of times, just remember support groups, things like that. People go to support groups because they're having a hard time and they need help. So you kind of have to take it in perspective of what it is. And support groups are great, and they've been a lot of help to me when I have questions, or even just to learn different things and things I don't experience. But you have to remember where people's mindset is when they go to places like that for help, and don't go down a rabbit hole of this is bad and use blanket statements of it's all bad. And remember your situation and your reasons, and focus on actually what's relevant to you.
well, and focus on, again, no two autistic people are exactly alike, first of all. So you might be seeing people talking about their experiences and be like, oh no, this is what I have to look forward to. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I think support groups are kind of a mixed bag too, because they can be very helpful. You can get strategies and advice and tips from people who have gone through similar things. But there's another kind of set of people that go into support groups, and it doesn't matter what the support group is about. There's some people that go in there because they just want a place where they can complain.
Yep.
And they're not looking for solutions. They just want to complain.
Yeah.
Either they just want to complain, or they just want a place where they can justify not actually dealing with whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be careful about that too,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and it's okay to expect the same amount of effort back that you're giving. I think that I've been pretty clear about that. It's like you tell me to make you a sandwich jokingly, and I laugh about it because I know that you
I'm
never,
just kidding.
you never ever expect me to make you food. There's been times when I've offered to make you food, and you've been like, "Oh,
I
you don't
still
have
feel
to
weird
do
about
that."
that.
It's
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just because you put in the same amount of effort as I do, and we kind of meet in the middle there.
Yep.
And I think that that's important. That's a big piece for the relationship. Is as a support partner in the beginning, during the reprocessing, and while things are kind of you're figuring things out, you might be giving a little more, but it's okay to expect it to come back to normal and be getting as much from the relationship as you're giving. That's okay. That's normal. That's healthy. So work through whatever you have to work through to find that balance. But I think it's important that you don't lose yourself in it.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and this might even sound cliche because it's so true about so many difficulties or issues or whatever, is just the communication, especially when you're talking about autistics. Because I remember, and this was even before I was diagnosed, but I remember we were having a disagreement about something. Basically, it was something that, like, you were frustrated that I didn't do, and I was frustrated that you didn't ask me to do it. So
Yeah.
how can you be mad at me for not doing it? And I remember you were like, I shouldn't have to ask. And I was at least at the point where I was starting to understand myself, not understand that this is because I'm autistic. But I remember saying, I'm sorry, but you have to ask me.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to actually communicate with me and ask me, because I am not going to pick up on it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick up on these subtle clues. I'm not going to pick up on, like, I need you to directly say, will you do this? Can you do this? Because I will gladly do that. Like, I think that's something that plays into the misconception that autistic people are selfish, because if it's not in front of us, if it's not directly told to us, we're not going to be thinking about it.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean I don't
you.
care about you.
Yeah.
I'm just completely unaware. And the fact that I'm unaware doesn't mean I don't care. It's just I do not have the ability to be. But once you make me aware, then yeah, I want to do what I can to help you. I want to do what I can to whatever it is that you need.
Yep.
And it goes both ways too. If you need something from your neurodivergent partner, communicate that to them.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and yeah, that communication is so important, and that's explicit communication is a big thing for autistics.
Oh, it's huge.
You have got to just say what you mean. It's one of those things that I still do not understand how that's the norm, quote unquote, to not really mean exactly what you say and not say exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of autistic people are misunderstood, because we're saying exactly what we mean and everybody else is trying to interpret it through this. Nobody actually says what they really mean. So what is he really saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, listen to my words.
Yep.
That's exactly what I mean. If there's more that I want you to understand, that would also be coming out as words. You know?
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
So.
It's the communication, like you said, is just, it all comes down to understanding each other better. And it's funny to me because I was just thinking about what you're talking, love languages. Our love languages are completely different.
Yeah.
And we've even had to have those conversations and communication, and discovering that, because my love language is touch. And that's hard for autistic people a lot.
Yeah.
You're pretty good at it with me. And you also now understand that even though your love languages are different and sometimes your needs are different, if I walk by you and put my hand on your foot and just stand there for a minute, you understand that that's me sending you love in my way. And I also try to send you love in the ways that you need it, and vice versa. Like, it's all communication. It's all blending those needs, but equal effort on both parts, I think, is, yeah.
I think if you have well, I don't even want to say it this way because I don't want to imply that people wouldn't have a good relationship if it's not the case. But I think there are a lot of cases where autistic people who, like, generally we don't like touch. And generally speaking, if I don't know you, I don't want you touching me. Even if you're an acquaintance, I don't want you touching me.
Yeah.
But there are people who get an exception to that. And my spouse is an exception to that, and my children are an exception to that. Like, most of what I've done in my life has been for my kids and my family and my wife. Like, that's not even trying to sound like a martyr. That's what I wanted to do. That's what has driven me. Whatever I've done, that has been the drive. Being in the presence of my kids brings me, joy and happiness. And unfortunately, that fact, being well known by other people, was used to hurt me intentionally. But yeah, in those cases, I love wrestling with my kids. I love playing around. I love hugs from every single one of them. I do not want to hug anyone else in this world but my kids and my wife. That's it. Like, I'm like, in the fire service, it was like a family thing, kind of. There was a brotherhood there. And so under certain circumstances, I might give someone a hug, but it was still a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I would be willing to do it.
Yeah.
But the only people I have given hugs and actually felt a benefit from that
Yeah.
is my kids and my spouse, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, we went so long the camera gave out.
Yeah.
It's definitely probably been even longer than the last episode, I think, but we'll see
Yeah.
what I can edit it down to.
Yep. And just like a glimpse into our life and our coming into autism experience, but hopefully like in the future we'll keep episodes a little less personal and stick more to things that help benefit everybody, but I also think personal experience is a big part of that. So
well, and like I said, when I was going through this, one of the things I wanted to see and hear was real autistic experiences. I wanted to hear real autistic voices. I didn't want to be told about myself by someone who had no personal knowledge. And you know, it, especially when you're going through it, it becomes your special interest. So I don't doubt that if there's people out there going through a similar situation, that they'll watch every bit of it or listen to every bit of it, because you know, when it's what you're looking for, when it's the information you're craving, people will do it. And that's my biggest point for wanting to do this is I know that I wanted to hear real autistic voices, and I wanted to hear real experience from people who like the neurotypical partners or whatever. Because usually if you're late diagnosed, there's a real good chance that you're in a marriage with someone who isn't neurodivergent. There's a good chance that you're with someone who is too, and that's why you get along. But so I think it's really important, especially if people are late diagnosed, that they can hear these real voices and hopefully be able to connect and understand.
Yeah.
For sure.
It makes sense to me. Well,
that's pretty much it for this episode, I think. As always, please leave us some comments. If you want to like comment about how your experience is the same or different or whatever. If you have any questions for either of us, feel free to leave those in the comment section wherever you're viewing this.
Suggestions, we're always willing to learn more. So yeah, definitely give us your feedback. We're in this to learn and grow, and hopefully if we can help anybody along the way, that's even more of a benefit. So
like I said at the beginning, I'm hoping to get this together and put out by tomorrow. It helps that I usually work nights and I'm off tonight, so I'll have all night to do that. But it also doesn't help that I've had about an hour of sleep since I got home from work. So we'll see how that goes. If I don't get it out tomorrow, it'll probably be soon. And then we're going to try to get on a regular schedule of publishing new episodes on Wednesdays. And I've kind of been trying to come up with a production schedule of an episode, pretty much.
Next week we're going to talk about meltdowns.
Going to get more into meltdowns and try to talk about more specific experiences, what leads up to them, ways to recognize them.
Oh, cool. Those are more details and maybe some resources that we can offer next week when we put that out, but something to look forward to.
For sure.
So like this episode and subscribe to listen to more episodes and
follow us wherever you are, subscribe wherever you are. Those are the things that will help grow the audience the most. And to me, that's the biggest thing here. So if you listened this far, we appreciate it. Again, please keep checking in with new episodes, and we will talk to you again next week. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.